talk about and what I want us all think about design decisions and things we think when we are designing service for users. I will have a case example, but I'm not going to present it as a case. I'm going to present it as a backdrop for the thinking and choices we are making when we are designing for users. The service I'm using as an example is the radio.fi. It's an old service, 3-4 years old at least right now. And it began as serving live radio broadcasts through the internet on your mobile phone or through the browser. It has grown quite a lot, changed quite a lot recently. It does also serve audio on demand, and it has different categorizations and different features added throughout its life cycle. It's not really a typical case for Reaktor because the budget isn't that big. It's not not a huge project. It doesn't have a centralized customer client as our projects usually do, and there's not a business that would drive the values and goals for designing the service. And that also makes it quite interesting because we're also able to experiment with lots of stuff. Kiitos. Experiment lots of stuff without being afraid that we're going to break the crown jewel of the radio channels, their own live broadcasts. It's also interesting because we can try out another new stuff there, see how it affects how people behave and how they use the medium. And also, it's a nice example because it's a love child of Samso Kuronen, one of my colleagues. It's quite typical for Reaktor that there's someone who really puts their effort developing a service, and then it comes live and stays alive after birth, and it will find a good audience. Also, it's interesting because radio is dubbed to be dying media for a while now. People, youngsters, they're using lots of audio media, but it's not necessarily radio. So it's interesting to see how to design something at that field and change how people will behave and how they will perceive the radio. So I'm going to talk about the latest iteration of radio.fi. The reason for grabbing the service and making an iteration on it was that there are some Android OS changes in the latest systems that killed off the features that the old service was relying on. So we needed to redo some of the stuff really fast. Also, we really wanted to change the way that the audio on demand appears in the service. We needed to change the way and adjust the customer experience in a way that it would appeal to new target groups, and that would naturally change the way that the service is built. But my idea is not to talk about how the technology went and what was the technological point of view. It's more about how to serve people and how to do stuff that influences how people behave. So the general topic today is how to influence the customer's behavior, how they use the media, how to build new features so that they attract new users with the changes, and at the same time how to do it in a way that doesn't break it for the current loyal users. And I'm going to use 3 points of view to talk about this. First is how to balance between the customer experience and monetization. Then about how to balance between the structures of the media, what the structures media imply there, and with the customer jobs. And then I'm going to talk shortly about what's the hardest and most disgusting thing in the way we work with these kind of services. Despite the radios being a partly publicly funded service, we needed to experiment with how to make some money out of that. We used some time to explore possibilities that would be non-intrusive, that would be more indirect, like would there be someone who's interested to buy information on how people, the users, interact in the multi-provider platform like radio.fi, or we're looking for possibilities if there's someone who is willing to pay us money on for get their own media appear there. We didn't find anyone. We didn't find any way within the project constraints to make indirect monetization. So what we're left up with was the good old display advertisements and also possibility to build premium subscription and features in the service. With the banner advertisements, with the display advertisements, we had a slight problem though. The redesign and customer experience streamlining we were about to make would make a change that people using the service would be flipping through not that many screens anymore. So there's no way that we could have made money out of the display ads. And we're kind of thinking if that's okay or what we should do about that. The old wisdom of display advertisement in the internet told us that we should either artificially add amount of the screens that people need to flip through to get to their goal, or then have just few screens and infest them with display advertisements. Both of these approaches sounded quite bad regarding the idea of streamlining customer experience. So we started a chat with one of our colleagues that is more experienced in the domain of display advertisements, and from this, the more you put monetization in the service, the more money you get model. We found out that the curve is more like bell curve, meaning that if you don't put any monetization features in the service, you won't get any money out of that. But on the other hand, if you invest it with the display advertisements or other money-making features, then you won't get any money out of that either, because people will go away and not use the service. And things are a bit more complicated, since it's not really a bell curve. There's sweet spot somewhere within the mix of money-making features and customer experience features, and you really don't know where it is. And to make things even more complicated, if you're going to make multiple changes at the same time, it's nearly impossible to predict that what will be the outcome, or even after you made the change and see how people have behaved, you have no idea what affected to that behavior. So what we did was that we decided to start with really small changes. We ditched the premium subscription, stick with the display advertisements. Also, we decided to start really softly from the customer experience end. It's always possible to tighten the screw on the monetization further, but it's really hard to come back from the monetization end. If you start there, all people will go away, and it doesn't help much to ease out on the pressure there. And what this meant in practice was that we have screens that are really intimate, like the player or your favorite's home screen. We wanted to protect them from display ads and ditch them from there altogether. Also, we have the programs and channels that are publicly funded, and we decided not to put any display ads there. But then it was free game otherwhere in the service. And we figured out that, okay, if you don't meet the display ads, usually when you're just going to your favorites and scrolling around there, but you will meet them after you scratch the surface and dive bit deeper, then it's okay to have them there, and you realize that this is the stuff that powers this service. I guess we would have done it this way even if there would have been a demand for fast monetization, because it's always easier to, or always better to have some end-to-end feature instead of designing the most elaborate and detailed thing up front and then take years to implement it. And currently we're collecting insights and feedback to see how people actually behave and think about this change. Then a few words about structure and benchmarking, about things that really caused us to reduce the amount of the screens that people need to flip through. As I mentioned earlier, the radio.fi has evolved quite a bit. The things we inherited in the structure from earlier on were the structures that served really well listening live radios on your mobile or in your browser. And the changes, for example, promoting audio on demand and improving interface for car use would necessarily make some changes there. Reasons to serve more and have people to get exposed more on audio demand was the thinking that we wanted people to find more quality content that they could use and apply to their audio needs. And that was because when people get more quality audio, when they find stuff that really pleases them, they will be more happy customers and they will be customers for a longer time. The funny thing is that the audio demand had been there for quite a while, and if we look at the statistics, it looks like no one really wants to use it or finds a use for audio on demand. But after some user interviews, we found out that users really are not aware that the feature is there. They might have seen it at time, but they couldn't remember it or they didn't actively think using it. So the most simple and straightforward change that we could make was that we would promote the audio on demand in the navigation. And as the old saying goes, you can't change navigation without changing the structure and description of the content. And this was a bit problematic for us because, as we can see, lots of the content is described in really unequivocal quality of. There are episodes that have quite a lot of description with them. In the middle, we see an episode that doesn't have that much description with them, and then we have a channel that really doesn't tell what it's broadcasting at the moment. And we can see that the episode names are just time stamps. They don't make much sense, and all in all, the data was really full of holes. And this really was a big problem, since we're planning to go from the quite straightforward channel program and episode structure to more fluid structure that users could end up with any level of media, any type of media from anywhere. And we needed better ways to structure things and tell the user where they should be at and how they should understand it. We did quite lots of benchmarking, trying to find out how other people have solved the similar problems. We took a look to all the favorite applications at the moment. And usually using that method, you would end up taking the things that you love most in the example services, taking the best possible case from your own service, data-wise and regarding the pictures you can find, and would construct something that's so optimal that it really doesn't exist in your service. And that would kind of go astray. Luckily, as usual, we had the luxury to work side by side with developers, and what that did was that we'd always be able to access live data, real data from service, imply that to our designs, and then it would drastically reveal the loopholes in our thinking. We were really fast to find out that what we were designing was really not that good, and we needed to change our thinking, and eventually found out that the benchmarking actually is pretty toxic, because you're tempted to copy nice feature from computer service, not understanding why it was there in the first place and what good is it in that context. So the most useful thing that we got from benchmarking was reverse engineering their solutions and trying to understand what they were solutions for in the first place. And what it led us to was, for example, instead of using strict channels, programs, episodes structure, we decided to try more tag-like structures for navigation, also in hope that we would use that as a mean for the radio channels to produce more accurate and better descriptions for their programs. And on the other hand, instead of using the album cover art pattern for our player, we decided to ditch the cover art or the pictures and have them as a backdrop, and then use more textual descriptions of what we're listening at any moment. And also wanted to make clear distinction between the audio on demand in the middle to the live broadcast on the right side to promote their differences. The interesting thing in data was that adding new tricks to the old media to work made quite a bit of change how people behaved in the service. If in the old days the search that also extended to the audio on demand would have first program search after top 100 searches. The first 100 were different forms of the channel searches. When implemented with the voice command, voice search tool, people's behavior would change quite a lot. Now we get first program searches at the around the top 10 instead of top 100. So it's interesting to see how small and detailed changes would actually change how the people perceive the media and how they use it. So in this sense, yes, it was worthwhile to teach old media new tricks. It was worthwhile to try even small improvements, small changes, because they really affect how people behave and how they see the media. This probably doesn't change the future of radio, but it does raise a question if the radio is dying media after all, because throughout all the experiments we did with the displays and data, we found out that radio has most of that program and most of that content that people go to other service for, and it's good to find ways to make it visible and make it accessible there. Then few words about what's hard. First of all, with this budget, with this timeline, it wouldn't be possible to produce service this quality and launch it without working side by side with developers. And yes, we had lots of ideas for different features, interaction, different kinds of interaction with the media, visualizations, content recognition, music recognition, recommendations, and so forth. But if you would have been making all that design work up front before starting coding, we would have been launching any service because it would have consumed all the budget, and that would have been bad. It wouldn't have been responsible use of our clients' money. Also, much of our predictions on what the features actually should do and how they should work would have been really flawed, because many of the features wouldn't have been working in an optimal way because we didn't have access to the real data at that point, or because we didn't know how to best handle that data. So actually it's a good thing not to avoid working with big design up front, but hard stuff actually is on the flip side of this, because it requires quite a lot of seniority and self-confidence to know that which of the great ideas you come up with the initial design phase are actually the ones that you need to push forward. There will be timeline budget restrictions, and you need to be responsible of deciding and thinking that what to include and what to ditch. And no one else will do that for you, and that's really hard work. Those are really hard decisions. Also, you need to grow sense to understand when to go with the sensible defaults that your developer colleagues came up with in a matter of days when they're waiting for your perfect design. They might be really okay, they might be even better than the ones that you'd be making, and then understand when are the moments and what are the places that you really need to push your detailed design decisions and your imaginations into the project to make it better. That's really hard to balance, and it gives gray hair to us all. And also it requires something from our clients and our developers. They need to withstand some of that uncertainty, because you don't know beforehand what will be the final form and what will be the final phenotype of the solution you will be producing. So to come back to this, how do you really upgrade and develop service? How do you introduce new features without breaking the whole thing? How do you keep the old users and still include new ones? And I guess what I'm saying, the solution is that putting in some monetization, or at least or almost any change, you have to start quite easy, not to make too many things at the same time, not to push them too hard. When you want to benchmark, you should more reverse engineer, and you should definitely use live data instead of making an optimal case on your design. And to make this all happen, you need to learn to focus your effort and think where to put your design efforts. Thanks.